Hello everybody and welcome to the Alternative Sports Show. I'm Matthew Connell and I'm also very excited because the Premier League is close to returning. Yes, it's on the 17th of June and we're going to be treated to Aston Villa versus Sheffield United and Manchester City Arsenal. So two bumper games, different ends of the table, all very, very important. To help me contain my excitement as ever, Andre Dixon, my good friend, how are you?
I'm so excited. Not long to go. I've got my calendar crossing off every day, ready to go.
It's a countdown to Christmas. We don't need Christmas. We have football. And to help contain myself and Andre's collective excitement, Vaishali Bhardwaj, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Yeah, and I'm really excited to be on the podcast for the first time.
Well, we need someone with a bit of credibility to kind of iron me and Andre out. So I appreciate that as ever. So thank you for joining us. And Andre has said so many good things about you. And so I thought, well, you know what? That's what we need. We need someone professional to help us out here, get through all this excitement. So thank you very much.
Firstly, you guys are the professionals. Let's be honest here.
No.
We're professionals.
I feel like we're big time now.
Andre, you guys had met before, but outside of football?
Yeah, so we actually, funny enough, we met at the NFL practices. I believe it was for the Rams, maybe. I could be wrong. But we got our other platform, the Sports Edge, where we talk about NFL and American sports and so forth. So I cornered Vaishali and said, that sounds a bit more sinister than it should do, but
professionally cornered.
Professionally, completely, and with social distancing as well. And just asked her if she can, because I was a big fan and I've seen her on television a lot. And she was just cool, absolutely cool. I feel like I've known her for years and years and years, and technically I kind of have now. And and she smashed it out the park. And then I've just been really excited to be able to get to a position where we're big enough to now get her on board.
I would have come on board regardless, Andre. Yeah, no, we met at the NFL a couple of years ago. We were just talking about it off air. 2018, incredibly.
Yes.
Time has flown.
Wow.
And no, I think we saw each other again at another NFL game.
Yeah, we was at the in the Wembley. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. So yeah, we've known each other for a while now. So yeah, happy to contribute to the show.
We got two appearances, 2 selfies. And then we're going to get another one at some point again when we can see each other again.
Absolutely.
We're just ramping up the star power. So good work, Andre. We're rocking and rolling now on this show. Now we got a little bit of credibility. But before we go into all things Premier League, Vaishali, of course, I have never met you before. So let's find out together with our audience all about you. Because of course now you're part of Premier League Productions, doing a lot of cool stuff on the screen. But let's rewind. So how did you get into journalism? Was it always something you were interested in, or did you take different routes? Was it an accident? How did you get here?
I definitely took a different route into journalism. Actually, my interest in journalism really goes back to when I was a little girl. As you can see from the fact that I'm sitting in front of a bookcase, which is one of 2 bookcases in my house. I love books. I've been reading ever since I was a little girl. And I think reading made me inquisitive about the world that we live in. And I was a keen writer when I was younger at school. But the funny thing about then was I loved writing. I loved reading newspapers. I loved sport. I played lots of sports, but actually I was really into science. So for me, the science element of wanting to become a microbiologist and eventually a forensic scientist, that actually superseded my love for journalism. And I thought, actually, I'm going to go for a career in microbiology and forensic science. So I actually trained to be a scientist. I went to one of the best universities in the world for science, which is Imperial College, did my degree, bachelor's in microbiology, and did a master's in forensic science as well. And then it was at that point I actually realised that my whole dream of becoming a scientist, which I'd had since I was about 6 or 7, actually I realised I loved the theoretical side of that trade. But actually, having now worked in it for a little while, I didn't actually like the practical side of it. And I just thought long and hard, actually, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And yeah, long story short, I decided to switch careers. And, you know, the only other thing that I do love, I mean, I love music. I play the viola, I sing, I was in a choir. So I've got other interests. But apart from science, it was writing and football. I love football, been a massive football fan. All of my family are mad football fans. You know, I grew up in East London in the shadows of the bowling ground. So you can imagine every other Saturday there were West Ham fans everywhere. So I've been surrounded by football my whole life. And I thought, yeah, let's do this. Let's try this. Let me become a football journalist, because I can imagine that I'd love working in the field. And I think that was for me the most important thing, that I loved doing whatever career it was that I chose. And I did a few internships. The first one was BBC Sport. And that was just with the aim of working out whether or not I'd like the practical side of the job, you know, working in the evenings, on the weekends. And I fell in love with it. And that's what basically persuaded me to seriously pursue a career in journalism and football journalism.
So you've worked for like many organisations within the sports world, obviously Talk Sport, Sky, Evening Standard and Premier League. Like, how valuable was that to like dipping your toes into this media world regarding football and sports?
I think it was really important for me. I mean, I trained to be a football writer first. So what I did was, all of the work experience placements I did was all with websites. It was all to do with writing, and I did it at NCTJ in journalism, with sports journalism, but it was all writing focused. It was to become a football writer. But I learned quite quickly and early on that actually I quite liked being on camera, and I quite liked being on radio. And I saw how the field was changing. You know, it was very much becoming a multimedia arena. So I saw journalists going on TV, radio, but actually also writing. And I thought, I want to be ahead of the game here. I want to make sure that if a TV opportunity came, I'd be ready for it. So that's why I did such a diverse range of work placements and jobs early on. When I was freelancing initially, before I went full-time to writing at Metro and the Evening Standard, I was at Talksport, I did production work. I did radio at BBC, BBC Asian Network, BBC 5 Live. And that was just to see whether or not I liked, A, working in radio and TV more than writing, but B, if I wanted to go into production work, should I go into broadcasting rather than being on camera? And what I learned was, actually, I like producing, but I don't like it as much as being on camera. But also I wanted to go into writing full time. But that experience helped me to kind of, I think, narrow down my options early on. But actually now, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later on, it's helped me become the broadcaster that I am, because I had that early experience of being on radio and on TV. So I think it's an important thing for any aspiring journalist, if you do have the opportunity, and especially if you're unsure as well about if you want to be on TV, on radio or writing, do as many different things as possible. And, you know, it's that practical experience that will help you decide what you should then kind of hone in on.
I think what's so significant about that, because I can relate to the production side, because that is my background. And whilst if someone's never heard of me before, they're going to think, is this guy a presenter? I'm definitely not a presenter. I'm just needed a creative outlet during this lockdown. I got a good friend, Dre, that helped me do this thing, and here we are. But I've seen through so many friends from working in places like Sky Sports. I worked with people like Adam Smith, who was from Soccer AM, Laura Woods, as she was kind of coming out of the kind of ashes of Game Changers and working up towards what she is now. Even Alex Scott, who was, of course, at the time a footballer. And I've noticed, even in entertainment, there's a lot of TV presenters that have come from a production background. And I think that's so important, right? Because like you've kind of just explained, you have to almost create so many different layers that make you a better rounded professional. So like within those experiences, especially in production, was there anything that sticks with you today that helps you think, this really helps me as far as how I present stories, reports and whatnot on camera?
I think the early production work that I did do, it's helped me appreciate how much goes into the work that I do on camera. And actually now at Premier League Productions, one of the roles that I have, I work on their breakfast show, Premier League Today, which actually airs 3 times a day, but I work predominantly on the first show of the day. And a lot of the times I'm working with the producers to talk about the stories that they think I should cover. But because I've done that production work in the past, I also can contribute and say, actually, I think this is the main story. or I think this is who we should get on for whatever reason. And I think it gives you an appreciation of how much work goes into things, and how better to structure things if you are actually actively involved in production of something that you're also presenting on. At the Evening Standard, my last role, I was making videos, video reports and video features for the site. And actually I didn't work with anyone. I had an editor who would edit the videos sometimes. But the production side of it, I did it all myself. So a good example was right at the end of my time at the Evening Standard, I made a tribute to Petr Cech. It was a 3-minute video. I had full say over what went into it. I produced the entire thing. I went to Madrid, I interviewed Thibaut Courtois, I went to Bournemouth, interviewed Asmir Begovic. But all of that, being able to kind of write a script, think about who should be on it, came from the fact that I'd done production work in the past. And I think that if you haven't had that experience, it could make it harder if you've then got a hands-on approach to a particular project.
Well, I think what's so valuable about that as well is, one, you understand your voice and you understand what you're passionate about. And sometimes, while it's useful to have advice, sometimes you have to trust your gut. And I think as any reporter journalist, because it is a crowded space, to really have a unique individual touch, you have to really understand everything that goes into it. But I also think what's really compelling about what you've just mentioned is also, and I'm aware of what goes into Premier League productions. I've got a friend, James Alcott, who obviously does stuff with Premier League as well. And you don't need a lot of people now. I feel like the way digital media has changed, and we kind of found roles outside of traditional broadcasting. You don't need tens of people to support your idea. So now you have a bit more freedom to create. But for yourself, Vaishali, have there been any key people along your way, your journey, whether it be people in production or friends or other peers in the kind of on-screen world that have supported your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Early on, when I was at BBC doing the internship, my very first internship in the field, Phil McNulty, the chief sports writer, I think he's the chief football writer technically actually, who still works for them, he actually supported me from that moment on. So he gave me advice after I left the internship, and it's funny, 10 years on, talking to him now, I think I saw him at a Villa game just before lockdown, and he says, oh, it's so great to see how far you've come from that very first internship. But he's someone who gave me advice regularly as a kind of informal mentor. So he's one of them. There's a guy called Joseph Harker who works for The Guardian as well. He champions BAME representation in the media.
Amazing.
And he actually oversaw the Positive Action Scheme, which I worked on at The Guardian. So that's like a 3-week placement to anyone from a BAME background. And, he's been someone who's really supported my work as well. Darren Lewis, which I'm sure you guys know about, he works for The Mirror. Does stuff for CNN. He's always been a big believer in me and what I'm doing and my journey. So there've been a few people definitely who've supported my work and who've encouraged me to go down the route that I've gone down.
So you're now part of the Premier League productions. Congratulations on that big move.
Thank you.
And how exciting has that been? And how has that actually helped you develop as a journalist?
It was a huge move for me to make last summer, because it was essentially me going from full-time football writing to a full-time TV broadcast career. My studying, all the studying that I did do was actually in football writing. So for me to make that jump and to have someone who said, actually, I believe in you, I think you can make the jump, was huge. Luckily, I've been fantastically supported by everyone at Premier League. I mean, the amount of feedback I've gotten from them has been incredible. And everyone's so lovely to work with as well. And as an opportunity, it's been fantastic. I was working 3 days a week initially, was promoted quite early on to 5 days a week, working on this breakfast show. I get a good 6-7 minutes on air every day. And I think being on air every day really does make you and kind of forces you to improve very quickly. So for me, it's been a fantastic experience working with excellent people. But as an opportunity, it's incredible. I mean, I get to interview, 1 or 2 Premier League players every single week, managers. I'm at games, I'm at the stadiums, I'm in and around those sort of big stories every day. And I really couldn't ask for a better opportunity in TV and to be working with such great people. So it's been an incredible opportunity and one that I'm really cherishing.
Because I think what for me, like obviously when I first saw you on the television before I met you, is that you capture the excitement of a fan, but obviously you're very professional, very good at your job. But what you've got is that enthusiasm and excitement. So I feel like if you're meeting, if you meet Messi, then I meet Messi, and I think that's a very rare thing. So right now, so what would you say is like your favorite highlights so far of your career?
I think it's
besides meeting, obviously,
obviously, besides meeting you and being on this podcast, there's been so many. There's been so many. I think I'd have to say covering the World Cup, the 2018 World Cup. That was my first ever World Cup that I actually physically went to and covered, and being at the final as well. It was just incredible to have achieved that dream. I think that was a big highlight, being around that kind of arena with the best teams in the world. Meeting journalists as well from other countries, that was a big highlight for me. I think this season has been a big highlight for me as well, being on TV. I absolutely love the buzz of live TV, and having those opportunities of doing those interviews on camera. And that's been a big plus for me as well. So, but there've been a lot. I mean, I've met quite a lot of incredible athletes. I interviewed Ronaldo a couple of years ago. That was a great moment. I think everything, but I think if you had to pick up one thing, it'd be the World Cup. So
just one last thing on that. What I think one of your skills is that I think that you're one of the few people, well, actually probably the first, to really hammer the social media side of it. So through your Instagram, we get to see behind the scenes, what it's like when you first see the stadium, your first reaction. Obviously, if you go in the tunnel or all the types of things that I would say regular journalists just take for granted. That I would say through your eyes, you'll be like, wow, look at where I'm sitting. This is amazing. Even though you obviously deserve to be there, and we know you've got the credentials. But I think that for me, I think that that's the thing that's special about yourself. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you
so
much.
This is the big up show. This is congratulations show.
No, I really appreciate that. I think early on, I've got a passion for football. That's clear. That's why I'm working in the field. But what I wanted to do was convey the passion that I've got to the people who watch my video reports, who read my work. I wanted to make sure that there was a connection there. I hope that comes across, and you've kind of mentioned that. So I think hopefully it is coming across. But for me, I wanted to give people an insight. For me, I didn't want to be a journalist who doesn't talk to fans, who thinks that I'm in a different arena to them, because we are all football fans. So that's why early on I started a YouTube channel doing vlogs. The YouTube channel is coming back later on this year, actually.
Yes.
Just giving a plug there for my YouTube channel. But I wanted to make sure that there was this bridge between me and the fans, even if always I can't reply to people on Twitter or Instagram, that they can share what I see every day, and they can share my passion for the game.
Well, that's the most important thing about football, is more than ever, a fan has a valid opinion. And that's something that we try to do, is to try and talk to everyone, in every corner of football, because at the end of the day, there's no football without the fans, there's no football without the players, there's no football without the journalists. It all goes hand in hand. But for you, what has been, double question, double header kind of thing, what has been the easiest interview you've had, and what has been the hardest interview you have done?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'm going to have a think about this, and I'm going to come back to you.
I'll come back to you.
Surely it's a Liverpool player. Like, obviously, they're just the most friendly, not only just the best team, but the most friendly team to be able to interview. Non-biased, of course.
I interviewed Shaqiri. I think it was late 2018, after Liverpool had beaten Arsenal, thrashed Arsenal actually in that game at Anfield. And that was a really easy interview to do, because he was willing to do it and he wasn't in a rush. And often what you find with players in a mixed zone is they want to go home. They've got family members waiting. Often they'll be just there near you saying, come on, hurry up. They've got places to go. But he took his time with that interview. And I think that was one of the easier ones that I've done for that reason. But he was also really lovely to speak to. But there've been quite a few though. I need to think about a few more. I'm going to have a think now, and I'll come back to you.
I always end up being a footballer's worst nightmare, because when I would produce and direct content within the football space, especially in media days, I'm that guy that has to explain to the players what silly little challenge or silly little interview that they're going to do after hours at training. And it's so hard because you know the score as well. It's like you get these, you might get these players before training, you might get them after training, in and around the matches or in their personal time. And especially when it's like for myself, when you do like a physical challenge and say, hey, look, the XYZ brand wants to do another shooting challenge. I'm so sorry. And it causes all kind of things. I've definitely seen with my team and myself, players that might go, oh God, well, I need these boots now. And I look into their kind of liaison to help them out. And look, it's part of the parcel. This is why the Premier League is the best league in the world. And that's it. That's part of it. We've got to keep people interested. And even more so, players are going to dread this now because now football is coming back. A lot more obligations are going to be coming on. It's not just going to be e-gaming. The proper interviews will happen this performance, relegation, European places. So, of course, as we mentioned at the start of the show, on the 17th of June, the Premier League is back. So, Vaishali, this is huge, especially for yourself and Premier League production. So, how excited are you?
Oh, you know what? I'm so happy, so excited that it's coming back finally. Also excited about the fact that the rest of the games are on. I can't remember how many are left now, but they're all on TV. Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's 92. I don't know where I got the number from. I'm gonna have to check that. But yeah, that it's all going to be on TV. So even if I can't be at a game, I can actually watch everything on TV. I think I'm going to be footballed out actually by the time it gets to August. Super excited. About going back. Also intrigued to see how things will work really as a reporter and as journalists really. I mean, in the Bundesliga, we know that only a certain amount of journalists were allowed into games. So it'll be interesting how many are allowed in stadiums now, how interviews will work. I imagine they'll be over Zoom like this. I don't think they'll be done in person anymore. But yeah, no, hugely excited to kind of see what now happens in the league because clearly Liverpool are going to win the league. I can't imagine any other scenario other than Liverpool win the league. But the top 4 spots are still up for grabs. And the relegation zone, I mean, there's so much that could happen down there as well. So a lot still yet to be decided.
With that as well, I think it sets up that we're going to have the new normal now. I think now it'll be easier because we can now say, hey, you can do Zoom call interviews. You don't have to necessarily turn up at these training grounds and whatnot. It's completely changed our model. And I think it's been interesting seeing other sports like UFC, for example, continue their events and showing that it can be done. And I think that's positive. And I hope, how soon do you think it's a next season thing now where we'll see fans again? Or when do you think that will kick in?
Yeah, I think Richard Masters, who's the Premier League chief exec, he recently said it could be next season that fans come back. But I think everything is still going to be determined by what happens in wider society. You know, what the government says in terms of, the R rate, infections, and also when next season actually starts. So if this season ends and there's a 2-week break and we're back on again in September, I don't think the situation will have changed that much to allow, 65,000 people back into the stadium, maybe 30,000 sitting every other seat away from each other. So it could be next season, but I think it more likely will be 2021 actually. But again, anything could change up until next year. So we'll have to see.
So there's the, I do try to not be as biased and gloat too much on while I can. I've been waiting 30 years for this, so please allow me to.
I think I know what you're going to say now.
So we've got the Champions Tour of the rest of the teams, for the rest of the season. If we lose this league, no one's ever going to see me again, ever. But like with such a small amount of time that obviously left to play, who do you think has actually benefited more? Teams competing for Europe or teams, fighting relegation?
I think it's really hard to say who's benefited the most because every team's had their individual situations. You've had like clubs like Watford who've had players who didn't train initially. They've had a few positive coronavirus tests quite early on as well. Every club has had different things going on. I think one of the clubs though that has benefited massively from this break is Tottenham, and they are going for that Champions League spot because they've got Harry Kane back, and he could prove crucial to that run-in terms of securing a European spot. And Heung-min Son, he served his mandatory military service without missing any games. So you've got 2 key players back in attack Both look quite good, by the way. They played a friendly, like a game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium
Tottenham
last
versus
weekend.
Tottenham.
Tottenham versus Tottenham, yep. And both players look quite good, actually, particularly Son. So I think they're a club who could massively benefit from this break. But I think it's hard to say until we see the players and teams on the pitch just what kind of state everyone will be in, because, you know, every club's going through different things. I mean, Chelsea didn't have N'Golo Kante back in training for a while. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of quality of game we get back on the pitch next week.
I think it's made such a interesting impact for the summer, obviously. And of course, with news this week about looking at moving the transfer window. So everything is up in the air. Everything that all the dirt sheets were excited about, all those journalists that like to write up the rumours and, you know, people that like to make videos about which player's going to go next, it's completely thrown out of the window, which is, I don't know if it's for better or for worse. Of course, there's a lot of players on a lot of clubs' radars. There's a lot of players that get talked about that were being touted to move this season. And we're talking even before coronavirus. Obviously, you had a lot of players like Jadon Sancho. Everyone talked about where he was going to go. So, Vaishali, for you, are there any potential transfers on your radar which excite you or may have been impacted because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think it's really interesting what's going to happen with the transfer window, because I think the assumption is, and definitely was a couple of weeks ago, that clubs were going to look to decrease their spending in the transfer market. And if they were going to buy players, it might have been more loan deals or more younger players with more potential. But then you had those players like Jadon Sancho, like Timo Werner, like Kai Havertz as well, who were in demand before the lockdown happened. And then the question marks were actually which club could potentially afford these players. Well, we've seen what Chelsea are doing. They've been in the news all week, haven't they? Because, of course, it's believed they've agreed a fee, they've agreed terms rather with Timo Werner and are ready to activate his release clause. That's a 50...
Not to look too salty regarding that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good example of where Liverpool wanted him. He wanted to go to Liverpool. But because of what's happened with the lockdown, Liverpool are saying, actually, financially, this is not the right time for us to be splashing that amount of money on a player. And Chelsea have said, actually, we'll capitalise on this. Let's go in for him. But I think what Chelsea are doing is quite interesting. I think Timo Werner could be a really exciting player for that team, either up front by himself without Abraham or on the left with Abraham up front. This is a really young and promising side that Chelsea have. So if you add Timo Werner to the mix, a guy who has been scoring in the Champions League as well as the Bundesliga, I'm quite excited to see what
got lots of goals in him.
Absolutely.
And it's important. Chelsea need more strikers, so...
That's it. And one of the problems that Chelsea have had this season is that they haven't converted enough of the chances that they've created. But now there's reports that they're interested in Kai Havertz from Leverkusen. So it'd be crazy if they were to sign both of those players and potentially land Ben Chilwell, because they're in for a left back as well. I think what Chelsea are doing in particular, certainly what they're doing early on now, is what's exciting me the most. Chelsea are a club also that I cover. So for me as a journalist, it will be quite exciting to see new players come in. As for other clubs, I think it's all up in the air right now. I think clubs are just trying to get the Premier League restarted again before they can work out how much money they'll have to spend on players.
I feel like the Dutch league the year before was harvesting a lot of amazing talent. And now, like this year, it's been all about the Bundesliga. A lot of exciting players. And I feel like, you know, Dre, Liverpool as a club doesn't need the Chicago Bulls kind of revamp just yet. I think there's still a bit more time with your players. Nothing needs to change just yet. So don't be too salty.
I tried to not show it in my face, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. What I'd say is that I think I'm kind of glad from a fan's point of view that there's not going to be as many transfers as there normally is. One, I think the transfer market's just gone actually ridiculous, and there's no true value to people. As I was saying, like, you know, like Dembele and people like that are not worth over £100 million. But then also, I think that the coaches, like, you know, obviously Klopp, but then you've got Brendan Rodgers and people like that. The Sheffield United coach forgets my
Chris Wilder.
My head. Yeah, like people like that, like they deserve more attention and then more credit, because obviously coaching is everything now. So I think that now the whole let me just buy, you know, swap and change people isn't as interesting as seeing people use the resources, use the youth team players, like City are supposed to have, to their advantage, and actually implement those things that they've invested in a little while ago.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at what Frank Lampard did last summer when they had the transfer ban, and he brought Tammy Abraham back. He brought a lot of their Chelsea Academy graduates back to the club, and they did really well for a young team. A lot of those players hadn't even played in the Premier League for the first time, let alone the Champions League. They've done well, and they're fourth right now in the table. Now, it never hurts to have a couple of world-class players added to that squad, but I think that's a really good example of where they've excelled using their own homegrown talent. And that's actually what fans have loved and have wanted to see at Stamford Bridge for such a long time. You look at Arsenal as well. They don't have the sums of money to spend that, say, a Man City or Liverpool might be able to spend going forward. But they've got quite a young team. And actually, Unai Emery, he's partly... he has to be praised for how many of the young kids that he brought into that side. So those are two clubs where they've been able to bring through youth, and that has helped potentially the future of the club with these uncertain times in terms of financially. It could help the clubs going forward.
Let's hope. I'm still going to remain bitter until we get someone, but I have to enjoy the fact that we are going to be celebrating something we should do, after such a long wait.
I think you guys will be. I think Liverpool will be. I mean, 25 points clear. I can't see it going any other way.
You say that.
You can have that trepidation, because I'm sure all Liverpool fans are slightly still worried until it's over the line. But it's only going one way, isn't it?
Well, it's done, Andre. Just get the champagne off the ice, start drinking.
You know what? I think all like Liverpool, especially Liverpool fans, because obviously we've been there a couple of times where we've almost been over the line and then it hasn't happened. So all the Liverpool fans are just celebrating, but just always that little inkling behind you. So like right now, what we find basically we're busier than ever because we can get hold of the people that we normally wouldn't be able to get hold of, because obviously everyone's usually out and about and moving around. Your work schedule, I mean, I'm imagining if we're busy, you must be way more busy than us. So what's your work schedule like at the moment?
To be honest, the lockdown period hasn't been that busy for me because the show that I work on for Premier League Productions actually hasn't been on air. We're back up and running again next week in terms of my show. Premier League have been producing loads of content during this period, but not the show that I work on. So actually, I've had a lot of time off. I've done lots of podcasts, lots of radio work, which has been quite nice because you can do it from home. But actually, I've been able to kind of work on projects for the future. My YouTube channel, the relaunch of that being one of them. Do really mundane things like clean my house, which sounds really boring, but it's so important for the mental health.
Very important.
I tell you, very important to have a clean and serene house, and just get sort of things organised and sorted out that I just didn't have time for before lockdown. So it hasn't been that busy. It has been quite busy this week and last week, and of course next week's gonna be mental. So I've enjoyed a bit of downtime actually.
So what it's all about, cleaning. For me, I found that cleaning. I'm now like a house husband because I live with my girlfriend. She still works, so it's just me at home. I'm doing all that, and I like it. It's like it's about time, ladies, kick back. We'll look after the stuff here, and that's great. But also, cleaning, but also eating better. I found I exercise better at home than in a gym. So the gym membership's getting looked at once this is all done. So that's another thing. But no, it's been a positive time for lockdown, and I think it helped a lot of people kind of reassess their goals and what kind of targets they want to do in their life. So for you, Vaishali, as where you are currently, and you're in a very good place within the football world, what kind of career goals do you have next? Do you tend to set short-term goals and long-term kind of goals, or what is on the wish and dream list?
I set both. So I often set short-term goals in terms of the next couple of months, how much I want to develop in terms of broadcasting. And then I always set long-term goals. But I don't like to have things set in concrete, because I think life throws so many things at you that if you've got something in your mind to work towards, it's always good. And I've always had that. But sometimes you never quite know where the journey will take you. And a good example is me planning to become a forensic scientist. And then all of a sudden, I switched to sports journalism. So I never foresaw that coming. So in terms of where my career takes me now, I mean, I'm still working Premier League productions, hoping to continue that obviously with them next season. And hopefully do a little bit more presenting actually, because I do like presenting. And a big one for me this year will be the relaunch of my YouTube channel. So I had that platform. I was kind of vlogging on it, showing people the sort of behind the scenes of my journeys to, Champions League games, Europa League games, Premier League games. But I'm relaunching it with a different focus. It's all about teaching people the industry. So I'm quite excited about that. Can't say too much yet about it. And then just kind of seeing where things take me really. And yeah, just not trying to be too kind of hell-bent on having certain aims and just kind of enjoying the journey, I think.
I think what's so good about the YouTube channel side of things, for us, it's been almost like an outlet, especially for myself, like a producer, to try formats that I can then say to other businesses or partners, like, hey, look at something we've tried, and we'll show what works and what doesn't work. So for yourself, how important has it been for you, and of course with this relaunch of your channel, how important has it been just to maybe develop your tone and voice, or to try ideas that you wouldn't get to try within businesses? Because of course, there's layers to structures. People might say, oh, we don't have the time and resources. So how important is it to have your own outlet?
I know, absolutely. I think it's crucial. The reason why I started it was I just wanted a place where I could sort of spout out my views and do whatever I wanted to do, regardless of who I was working for at the time. Because obviously when you work for different companies, you've got different rules in terms of what they want on their platforms. But with YouTube, I could go to a match, do my work for the company I was working for, but then actually for 3-4 minutes, just kind of say my views, or I could make a match day vlog. I could show people my journey from my house all the way to the stadium and back. And it did also help me practice my broadcasting quite early on as well. Because, where else would you have a platform where, if you're not working in TV, if you haven't been trained in TV or broadcast journalism, can you actually watch something back of yourself and say, oh, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. And have fans or people tell you, nah, that's not good. Yeah, that's good. You can't really get that anywhere else unless you're doing Twitter videos or unless you're recording yourself every day on your phone. Yeah. So for me, YouTube was quite nice. And also I think it helped me connect with fans. So when I was covering Chelsea for the Evening Standard, I would put up these Chelsea vlogs, and I quickly saw from the analytics, what types of content the Chelsea fans wanted more of. And with that, I kind of could tailor my videos, but also I could go back to work and say, we should be writing more about this player. We should be focusing more on the youth talent coming through. So I think it's an important platform. If you're willing to put yourself out there, I think that's quite important, because you have to be ready for potentially abuse you might get as well, because that's the flip side of social media. There's always that side of it. But I think it's quite important to have another outlet, whether it be Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, certainly that aspiring journalists can use to get better at the broadcasting side of things.
Just with everything that's going on, obviously, with the world at the moment, where it seems like a bit of a dark place and challenging times. What I remember is that obviously when we met, especially when we was in the executive boxes.
Look at you guys. Where's mine?
We didn't want to mention it. We didn't want to mention it. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah. more parsley needed on some of that food, I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I noticed very much so is that obviously we're always quite got our feet in the ground and very grateful to be there, because obviously we're not too far away from the actual fans who pay. But what I noticed in that small box is that there's not much representation of people from a multicultural background. So one, what is the challenge like regarding that? Especially, obviously, I see you on Sky, and then you're on Sunday Supplement, and literally you may be the only person of colour on the table. Although Sky, are very good regarding pushing that. But then also, so one, what's that like, being the only one usually at the table? And then two, what would your advice be to people who want to follow in your path?
In terms of what it's like, I'm going to be honest here. I have never really looked at, when I go out into society, I never think of myself as a woman who is Asian and is the only Asian woman in a room full of white men. I just never have looked at myself like that. what has made me realize and think about that more is the reactions of other people to me at times, particularly early on in my career, when I was one of the few Asian women in press boxes, one of the few women. I think I was the first Asian woman on Sunday Supplement, for example.
Yeah.
It's other people's reactions that has made me feel a bit different.
And does that have an effect on you?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, definitely.
Know,
particularly early on in my career. I wouldn't say it has affected me now, because I'm quite thick-skinned and I've gotten used to it essentially. But early on, when I got a few funny looks here and there at games, a couple of comments, it didn't make me feel great. Especially when you are that young writer by yourself. You don't know too many people in the press boxes. But I think that's where you've got to have that thick skin. And it's unfortunate because, I don't like the fact that everyone should have a thick skin in journalism because of the abuse you're going to get. I feel like everyone, whether or not you're, of that kind of mentality or not, you should be able to pursue whatever career without the fear of being abused, for example. So it did make me feel a bit different, but I'm that kind of personality where I always thought, well, I've got to get my job done, regardless of who's saying what, how people are acting. I'm there to do a job at the end of the day, and that's what I always went out to do. And actually, when it comes to who I am, I always felt that being a woman was the bigger issue for some people to handle than being an Asian person. So, but that's just my personal experience. And in terms of advice to aspiring journalists, I say, look, I'm working in a field. There are plenty of excellent top-class black writers, black broadcasters who are in our field. There are plenty of Asian people like Reshmin Chowdhury, who's at the top of their game, who are in the field. Now, if we've made it, you can make it too. It's not about, you having to break down the barriers for the first time. People have done it, and we are all here to help you and give you advice. So, on Twitter, I saw a call out from someone from the BBC to say, if any journalists out there want advice from if any aspiring journalists want advice from BAME journalists in the field, reach out to us on Twitter. And I just retweeted her request and saying, actually, anyone from a BAME background, get in touch with me. I've had 4 people who've DM'd me on Twitter, and I've given as much advice as I can. So we're all here to help, time permitting. So I would say, look, if this is a dream, go for it, and be prepared to have a thick skin, because unfortunately that's how the industry will make you. But don't be afraid of anything, because people have done it before, and we need the next wave of people to come through. That is imperative.
What do you feel like if you could give advice to the authorities? Obviously, I know you're connected with the Premier League itself, so I'll be careful how I put this question. But what do you feel that actually can be done by obviously Premier League, other organisations, and obviously media organisations as well, to be more inclusive and encourage more people to be able to get into this line of work?
It's interesting. I think definitely one of the things is when more people have made it, I think it gives aspiring journalists, the kind of point of contact to say, actually, look, I can see someone like me on screen, and that can inspire the next sort of batch of journalists. I think what's crucial is having that diverse workforce. And people sometimes say, why do you need a diverse workforce? The point is, if you have a diverse workforce, you have more views and differing views about a topic to provide your readership with, for example. And when things like what's happening now in society happens, when you've got really hard discussions about racism, about race relations going on in society as a whole, if you've got someone who is from a BAME background on your news desk, they are the ones who should be leading the way in terms of conversations, but they can give you a different viewpoint. If I was asked about my upbringing on a podcast I did last week, and I said, look, I grew up in East London. I've seen, me and my family have been victims of racist abuse and incidents. And if I was asked to talk about it, I could talk about it because I've been through it. But if you didn't have that representation in the newsroom, how are you ever going to talk about these hard issues? Sexism is another one. How can you talk about sexism if you don't have a female, in your workforce? It makes it easier to talk about different issues from different viewpoints. The other key thing I think is you need representation in terms of diversity in the boardroom, in terms of the people who are at the top of these companies who are hiring, because they are more likely to give someone a chance from a BAME background. I don't think anyone should ever be given a job because of their background in terms of race, in terms of color, in terms of like if you're a female or male. You should be given a job if you're the best at it. But I think there is no prejudice in then interviewing someone who is from those backgrounds in any way, shape or form. If you have a diverse boardroom, if you've got, you know, the heads of these companies who are from a diverse background, you just don't get that kind of prejudice anywhere along the line. So I think a lot can be done in terms of boardroom level, executive level. And then I think it's things like this, journalists just talking to the next sort of the younger generation saying, look, let's get you on board. And that's hopefully what I'm hoping to do with my YouTube channel as well, just reach out to those sort of next batch of BAME journalists.
Just in closing, I want to thank you for being an inspiration, you know, to people like myself and obviously the younger generation as well, and to being so inclusive. Because what usually happens is that, especially amongst any minority, effectively, journalists, like there's a crabs in a barrel type of thing where it's just like, oh, there can only be one of us can get forward. You know, one of us can get this interview and we don't want to team up. And I think that, you know, from the first time that I've met you to this point, you've been exactly the same, and your success level has gone up and up and up. And you know, I would say you're a pioneer, not because of you know, the quote unquote BME tag. It's just because of the fact that your social media game is ridiculous. You know, the fact that every time you're on you know, television, you make amazing points. And you know, besides your flirting with Chelsea, then I think that everyone should be checking out your stuff more, and leading, and basically, if you want to make it in this industry, you're the perfect example to be able to copy.
Thank you. Also, I think I'm an example to people who haven't had that journalism background. So if anyone's watching this and wants to make a career change, get in touch with me, because I can give you a few tips and pointers.
And if there's any scientists that want to, you know, or any football journalists, I should say, if there's any football journalists that want to become scientists, ask for the backwards route from Vaishali. You'll have them covered.
It might be a harder switch the other way around, I have to say.
You never know.
Everyone not impossible. Never impossible. Never impossible, though. That's the key thing. It's never impossible to do anything in life.
It has been fascinating, and it's been a pleasure, Vaishali, for having you here. It's been wonderful for me to, you know, learn about someone else within this industry that has done amazing things. So, as ever, thank you so much for giving us your time. Where can everyone find you on socials?
I was just going to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about my career and obviously my background. So I am very much active on social media. Andre knows this. He's already alluded to it. Yeah, so I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Vaishali Bhardwaj. You probably won't be able to spell it, but if you put it in the description of this podcast,
we'll put the links in.
Find it.
Absolutely.
Instagram at Vaishali Bhardwaj. I'm also on Facebook as well, and active. I'd say I'm active more on Instagram and Twitter than Facebook, but I do try and get back to as many people as possible via messages. So yeah, get in touch.
We still love you, Facebook. There's a place for you. Once again,
Vaishali's Instagram game is strong. So you know, we've got to step
stronger.
up now.
It's gonna get stronger. I'm just putting a warning out there.
We're having to just grab random people in the street, the celebrities, to say, look, can we do a selfie quickly, just so we can keep up with you.
It's going to get stronger. I'm going to drop a follow for sure. And once again, thank you so much, Vaishali. Massively appreciate your time. Andre, thank you forever, as always, being my top wingman. Of course, thank you everyone that has watched and followed this show. We shall see you next time. Peace.